Okay, we're live.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody here. I'll call the City Building Committee to order, and welcome to all of you. We are meeting virtually because of the COVID pandemic. Members of the committee are here, and I see also another member of council, and staff are also available to us. And I want to welcome everybody else that is watching us online as well. So the very first thing that we have on our agenda is a delegation. The delegation is by Margaret Prophet, who is the Executive Director of Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, and she wants to speak to us regarding the Just Recovery Simcoe. So there I see Margaret is available to us. So Margaret, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, well, I have to share my screen, so I hope that doesn't count against my time.
We're with us.
Okay, all right. Give me a second here. Just let me know. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, I think we've got it.
Okay, give me 1 second here. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak to the City Building Committee. As the chair said, my name is Margaret Prophet. In my day job, I am the Executive Director of the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, who is a founding member of Just Recovery Simcoe, but tonight I'm just acting as a volunteer spokesperson for the Just Recovery Simcoe Collaborative. I'm hoping to ask the City Building Committee to receive this presentation as information and perhaps look at ways to collaborate implementing the JRS principles into the strategic planning priority dashboard performance metrics. Why isn't that? Hold on. Oh, that's why. My first slide and my last slide are the same, so I started at the end. All right, here we go. Just Recovery Simcoe is an initiative of Simcoe County groups that believe a shift in how we make decisions and who we make the decision for needs to happen. With our COVID experience and as a broader society, it is a clear opportunity to correct the patterns that exacerbated the impacts of the pandemic. Simultaneously, we are facing the impacts of a climate emergency, mass biodiversity loss, which all leads to questions about our future food and water security. Clearly, we need a different framework than the decisions that got us here in the first place. So Just Recovery Simcoe collaborated, and keep in mind we have about 40 some odd groups, collaborated on the evidence about how we can make significant strides in public policy that has a high return on investment and efficiently addresses the pain points exposed during COVID and also pain points that exacerbate the climate emergency. So that led us to base our principles and policies on improving the social determinants of health. Importantly, we need to ensure we include measures that are directly aimed at improving the 80% of health outcomes that aren't a direct result of our healthcare system. These are also areas that are generally neglected or underfunded with current public policy. And I just want to make clear, I'm not saying the city of Barrie, I'm just talking in general scope here. I've included this slide as just a reminder about the various areas that are considered a social determinant of health. As you can see, they include broad social and public policy planks, which makes sense. I mean, if your goal is to actually increase the prosperity, resilience, and health of our human and natural communities. By focusing on the social determinants of health, we can approach decisions more holistically that properly prioritizes the value of human and natural systems on which our economy depends. Currently, we obsess over the outputs of our economy and rarely put attention towards the inputs. This extractive cycle is literally killing our communities, our people, and our natural environments. It should come as no surprise that our decision-making frame is based on 3 principles where sustainable, forward thinking decisions to simultaneously invest in people, communities, and the environment. So our first suite of policy decisions included everything from poverty reduction to increasing food security. And as you can see here, the simultaneous decision-making framework is balancing the needs of people, the needs of our communities, and the needs of nature. This is just summarized, but we do have a policy document that I can send to council later. Since I am talking to the City Building Committee today, I chose to focus on two large policy pieces that focus on built community and common decisions that councils will face dealing with infrastructure and community building. The first one is intensification over sprawl, and I hope council doesn't mind or committee doesn't mind, but I'm assuming you all are very literate, so I'm going to bring in some other points here while you go over those. With this slide, it's clear that choosing where to build from the outset can have large cost savings for the community and taxpayer alike. This cost savings has been determined by many jurisdictions across the globe, but today I'm using the city of Halifax as example. The first lens about intensification over sprawl is to ensure that it's not going into sprawl. So once a municipality has taken a policy direction of firm urban boundaries or intensification first policies, the next step is to ascertain the best location for growth that further invests in people, communities, and nature. Although avoiding sprawl is a good first step, intensifying in the middle of urban wetlands does not meet the criteria of simultaneously investing in people, community, and nature. So therefore, intensification isn't created equally. There's nuance to these decisions because, frankly, the decisions need to address complex needs. Traditionally, we ignored the complexity of our decisions and keep them within silos. And although that's an expedient way to make a decision, it does long-term damage to our communities and nature. Recent evidence suggests that sprawl can also be classified as tall sprawl, which is a bit of a tongue twister, due to high costs of servicing towers and how it erodes social cohesion. So without paying attention to how these decisions factor in the health of communities and people while also factoring in nature, we neglect built form that encourages social cohesion, walkability, and affordability. 1 second. As you can see from the bullets here, one of the other decision matrices is a transit over highways. And so transit investments have a much stronger return on investment than highways. And, doctors are telling us the damaging effects highways have on brain and lung development of children. Hydrologists are telling us the damage they do to our water. Traffic experts are even telling us how little they do to address traffic congestion. And yet we're still making the same choices. I mean, evidently, highways also contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. So typically, Ministry of Transportation does not consider the full impacts of highways on our water system, climate, or health impacts, which is why highways such as the Bradford Bypass has become a contentious issue. If we want to reduce congestion, we have to provide people with options about how they move. And further, it's an equity and justice issue since poorer neighborhoods tend to disproportionately burden the impacts of highways and transit investments. And I've included all the references there. And so hoping that the City Building Committee, like I said, can receive this as information and work with the Just Recovery Simcoe Collaborative to look at those metrics that you have within your priority planning. And that's all. I hope I timed it okay.
Got to learn that. Thank you very much, Ms. Provitt. You timed that very well, and I appreciate your comments. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Cohn.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. And I guess a question, maybe more of a comment, but a question back would be, is there anything you're seeing to date? So knowing that we've expanded our strategic priorities a couple months back to include a greener berry and climate action. And we've got a balanced scorecard that does showcase public facing a lot of some of those indicators across our strategic priorities from 2019 and forward. Is there a next step that you would recommend around re-engaging Just Recovery Simcoe or having a conversation about areas we can really drive forward, or need to maybe publicly amplify or showcase more formally about what we're doing that best aligns to, leading evidence and practice around supporting economic recovery and investing in people and nature? There's some great initiatives happening across the city that are not necessarily reflected in those pieces. So one area is, right now councillors are working around beautification opportunities across our wards. We're having great conversations around, opportunities to be a pedestrian friendly city, at active transportation and sustainability. but I was wondering about if there was an engagement or a next step that you would like to see more formally with the City of Barrie and carrying on this conversation.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, we have groups that are within the City of Barrie that are dealing with anything from the homelessness to strengthening of democracy. I haven't had a chance, I've gone through like a cursory review of the metrics, and I think you're right that there's opportunities to make sure that the metrics align with who you're making the decisions for and why you're making those decisions. Absolutely. And I just want to take the opportunity to applaud the City of Barrie, because I know that you were one of the first in the region to declare a climate emergency, the urban gardens. There's a lot of great initiatives you guys are doing. So I just want to take this opportunity to applaud you with it. Doesn't mean there isn't always room for improvement, because as my kids tell me, there's lots of room for improvement in me as a mom every day. So I would be happy to work with JRS to supply maybe our feedback on your metrics. I don't want to speak to it today because I think it deserves the amount of work that your staff and council has put into it. I don't want to just do a, off the cuff sort of thing, but I would appreciate it and welcome it if it was okay to submit a written submission to your staff or to the committee about those metrics and how they can be aligned or strengthened or just questions. Yeah.
That's great. And I guess in follow-up, Charitma, because I know, and that was a great presentation and summary of quite a lot of information behind those 3 pillars. So I think there's about 25 formal recommendations or steps. So I wanted to take a moment to say, I, even as an individual, take a look at those 25 steps and see, where can I move these pieces? Where am I active in the way in which I operate, I live my life, but also opportunities to kind of engage in those conversations. So it's a great resource and tool. And I guess I wanted to pause to see if it would be appropriate to ask staff, Ms. Miller, if there's a point in time in this year where we're going to see any type of update or refresh to our scorecard that would be a better timeline to have Ms. Profit re-engaged or looking at what we're doing. Because I think public facing, our metrics showcase 2019 outcomes, and I think we were doing some work, and then we've got the new OP coming out in May. If Ms. Profit's looking at engaging or giving us feedback or looking at what's public facing, is there a better time to look at that through this year?
Ms. Miller?
Through you, Chair Riepma, to Councillor Kunkel, I think that we certainly have a little bit of time that if the group would like to give us a written submission, certainly anything that's related to the official plan, we'd like to be seeing that sort of this spring so that we can work that into the policy framework that will be coming back before council in the fall, and as it relates to some of our other initiatives around environmental sustainability and the broader scorecard. Again, I think that if we could have some information leading up to the summer recess or even into the fall, that will still allow us to provide the update that you will be looking for.
Great, thank you. Because I know Just Recovery Simcoe, I think, isn't. I've seen other opportunities to kind of identify, how we rank or how we match up to different recommendations, and how are we doing it against, maybe a pledge or identifying, where we're making progress around things that align. There's quite an amazing amount of work staff have been leading, everything from our asset management and looking at efficiencies to, electrifying our transit to our economic circular economy. And so I'm hoping at some point it might create an opportunity to really showcase some of the amazing stuff that staff have been working on. So those are all my comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Councillor Riepma, and thank you, Margaret. It's good to see you. Thanks for the presentation. Couple questions. So I'm glad Councillor Kunkel and Ms. Miller mentioned the official plan, because I think that's a great opportunity for groups like Just Recovery Simcoe to have their say on such an important, wide-ranging policy. I wanted to note another opportunity that's coming up, which is a virtual public engagement meeting on our community energy and greenhouse gas reduction plan. And that's happening on April 22nd at 6:30 p.m. And it will be virtual, of course. So that might be something that could be helpful to be shared with your group. I did want to ask a specific question, since it is on our agenda later in this meeting, around the Bradford bypass. And I know in your work with a number of the groups you're involved with that you've looked into this a lot and have a lot of knowledge on it. The motion that we're considering is to request that the Government of Canada conduct a federal environmental impact assessment on the Bradford bypass. Do you think that's adequate? Do you think that's what we should be advocating for? I think some people may be confused why we're advocating on the Bradford bypass, but it may affect Lake Simcoe. And as we know, Lake Simcoe is incredibly important to our city. So do you think that goes far enough, or do you think there's anything else we should be considering on that?
Yeah. Through you, Chair, to Councillor Aylwin. I'll try and be brief here, but there is a lot of information in it. So first, Rescue Lake Simcoe Coalition and the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition enlisted the help of EcoJustice to request a federal environmental assessment for the Bradford bypass, specifically at the time because the provincial government had made an ERO proposal that would exempt the bypass from further study. Now, back in 2002, when the environmental assessment was completed, I believe that's when it got its certificate of completion, the government of the day said that this environmental assessment requires further study. Here are 15 things that need to be done in order to consider this to be compliant. So at the time when we asked the federal ministry to step in, this exemption was still open without any clear understanding of whether this exemption would happen or not. And to be clear, the way that the exemption is currently written would basically say whatever studies have been done are good enough and let's move forward. So the 15 studies would not be completed, nor would there be any further assessment on climate, Lake Simcoe Greenbelt Plan, because all of those things happened after the environmental assessment was completed. There is a case or two where the federal government has stepped in environmental assessments. The precedent isn't strong, but at the time that seemed like our only option to ensure that studies were done. Regardless of whether federal government steps in or not, we believe it is reasonable, considering the impacts, the environmental studies that were done with the Bradford bypass clearly outlined concerns for surface water and groundwater contamination. The Bradford bypass would be going over sensitive lands that are connected to the Lake Simcoe watershed and across the Holland River, which then flows into Lake Simcoe. So we think it's reasonable to say, considering these studies were actually completed in the late 90s and got their approval in the early 2000s, that the game has changed. We have climate issues. We have the health of Lake Simcoe is different than it was. We have all-day GO transit. There are a lot of things that have changed, and we think it's fairly reasonable to require the province to not only complete those 15 studies, but to ensure that studies are done that the Holland Marsh, Lake Simcoe, Greenbelt, those sort of things, any damage to those areas would be fully mitigated and understood. That is not where we're at currently. And so we are waiting for the province to make a decision with that exemption, which will have a whole bunch of precipitating events. And regardless of whether the feds step in, we'll still be seeking more studies from the province. So I hope that answers your question, because there's a little bit of a history in there as well.
Okay, no, I appreciate that context. That's very helpful, actually. So do you think it would be helpful for us as a city, considering the potential impacts to the Lake Simcoe watershed, to make a specific request to the provincial government to conduct these 15 studies that you have referred to?
Yeah, I think that Barrie has always recognized its important role as a steward of Lake Simcoe. You have tried to make your beach more accessible, to make it more pedestrian friendly. You have endorsed the strengthening of the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. So I think the precedent that the city of Barrie has about being a steward of Lake Simcoe, you have shown that your concern for the lake stretches beyond just your natural shoreline, right, or your existing shoreline. So I think to send a letter to the province to ensure the 15 studies are done. And just to be clear, the 15 studies that were outlined in the exemption did not specifically mention Lake Simcoe or climate. So the 15 studies would be based on some archaeological things, groundwater, storm management, flooding concerns, those sort of things, but did not specifically mention any of those, the Greenbelt or climate or Lake Simcoe, just because they predated it. So yeah, I would agree that sending a letter to ensure that the 15 studies are done and that the impacts to Lake Simcoe are clearly understood would be important.
Thank you. That's helpful.
That's
I appreciate it. And thanks for your presentation again.
No worries. I tried to jam a lot in a short amount of time.
You did well. Thank you.
We noticed that. All right. Any more questions from the committee members? All right. Any questions from the council members that are here? I don't see any. All right. Well, thank you, Ms. Prophet. It was great having you here, and I would encourage you and your organization to certainly connect with the city with respect to the official plan, because I do think that you have something to contribute there, and you can certainly, your organization can sort of, tend to push policy in a particular direction, in a greener direction, and I think that's something that we really ought to be working on in our plan. So thank you very much for your contribution, and I no doubt will hear from you some more, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you very much. And just to close, thank you for the time. And I also want to make it clear that, Just Recovery Simcoe, the Simcoe County Greenbelt Coalition, the idea is to actually merge with municipal governments and strengthen the advocacy work that we both do. It's not supposed to be one versus the other. We're really meant to try and support and strengthen the initiatives of our community because we're all a part of it. So I will not talk anymore. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Our next delegation is by Ian Malcolm, and he's speaking to us on behalf of the Rotary Club of Barrie concerning a proposed COVID Heroes Garden in Sunnydale Park. So, Mr. Malcolm, the floor is yours, and like everyone else, you have 5 minutes. Do we have Mr. Malcolm here? There we are.
I'm pictured. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, good evening, members of the building committee. My name is Ian Malcolm, not Ian.
Oh,
Not a
I
big
stand
deal.
corrected, sir. Sorry.
I'm here to present an idea on behalf of the Rotary Club of Barrie. We wish to do something to commemorate these pandemic times, the COVID heroes, and the suffering we've all had to put up with by construction of a garden in Sunnydale Park. So let's see if we can get that picture on your screen. It's supposed to come up now. No, it didn't. When I hit that down there. Try it again. Is it on your screen?
No, it's not.
Okay, it's on mine, but.
Oh, it looks like we have something happening.
Oh, good. Thanks, Tammy Maynard, for briefing me. Okay, in discussions with Barrie's Landscape Department, Rotary was directed to this area in Sunnydale Park. It's just east of the Dorian Parker Center, and it was already earmarked for work to be done by Barrie's Landscape Department, and they suggested our COVID garden would be very well placed here, since they were going to do something anyway. You can see in the key plan in the top, but it's pretty small, exactly where this is, but I think you'll all know it because these pathways exist already. It's currently surrounded with these paths and fully sanded in the middle with maybe 6 birch trees and a dozen or so hardwoods and firs. We've partnered with Jim Hossick, a local landscape architect who's created this plan. His name's in the bottom. And he has also created a written explanation, which you can choose to read later. I don't tend to read it, but essentially he's designed 7 planting areas and an open area, and they're symbolic of or interpret human behavior and reactions of the last year or so. The gardens are designed for quiet contemplation and stimulation of the senses and for meeting friends. They consist of a color garden, a fern wave garden, a conifer grove, a walnut grove, a wild garden, and 2 rock feature areas, a smooth and a basalt rock to mount plaques on and the like. The existing 12 or so birches and evergreens are all incorporated into the design of this garden. The total area is quite large if you see it. It doesn't look big here, but it's about 1.5 acres, say 150 by 250 or something in feet, and about 200 feet off of Sunnydale Road. The cost of this proposal, according to the estimate by Jim, professional in this, he's said it's about $80,000, excluding irrigation, which, although not essential, would be far better since there is irrigation in this park. Rotary Club of Barrie would provide $22,000 of funds, plus the manual labor for plantings, mulching, fertilizing, fundraising, and possible donations of plant material. We've also applied to the Canadian Healthy Communities Initiative for the remaining money and expect an answer in May. So to summarize, the purpose of my presentation is to ask for permission from you to agree in principle for this idea for us to move forward and proceed to the next step, which would be work with the landscape department to develop the idea further with other input from whomever that you might put forward. So that ends my presentation. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you very much for that. Marilyn, I see you have a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ian. Geez, it's been a little while. Thank you so much for bringing us this proposal. Thanks to Mr. Hossack and everyone else from the club and the team who worked on it. Could you just say a little bit more about the club's interest in specifically, this is to commemorate, not just to recognize the healthcare workers, but to commemorate those lives we've lost in the pandemic, or is it purely for recognition of those who fought the pandemic?
That's a tough question, and we've certainly talked about it.
Yeah.
It's to put names on a plaque of who we've lost.
Yeah.
Is not going to be a good idea.
No.
I think that our intent is more to have something to talk about these years, 219, 220, 221, and who knows, 222, just like 100 years ago, 218, 219, or I guess 1918, 1920. So that in the future of Barrie's inhabitants, they'll have a place to go to remember specifically, oh yes, there were a lot of lives lost. There were a lot of people who worked tirelessly at their own risk. And it's a place for those who maybe lost somebody to go and just sit and be closer to those they lost. I don't think it, like we've talked about the basalt rocks in the bottom right there, the square boxes. We wouldn't even know what to put on those in terms of a plaque. We'd like Rotary to be noted, but not any kind of banner or anything like that, just a quiet mention. But we want somehow and carefully selected wording to talk about a time that incorporated a lot of things like suffering, like death, like volunteerism, selfless work by some. That's the idea.
Yeah. Okay. So, if I might just offer a couple of comments. We did pass a motion at City Council last night to sort of consolidate these requests, and I hate to treat this as one of many because yours is so well developed. You're coming to us with funding, really just looking for a green light. Council did decide last night, because there are a number of potential projects to commemorate those who fought the pandemic and the lives we lost, that we would just sort of send them all to the clerk, and the clerk would work with the organizations that are prepared to move forward. If I can offer a couple of comments, though, I would treat this one perhaps a little differently than the folks who are coming to us with an early idea. This one is a developed plan. It's certainly an area of Sunnydale Park that I think this is perfectly appropriate for. And I happen to think as mayor that this is a very appropriate place to do it in the city. Those who visit Sunnydale Park will know it's a noticeable, it's almost a scar, the old playground. It's a big empty dirt sort of area, sand area, which is in need of something. It either needs to be reclaimed or turned into something else. And this is an ideal place. It's central in the community. It's shaded by enormous many hundred-year-old white pine trees, which are landmarks in themselves. And so I think it's a location of some significance, which befits a commemorative garden. And the other piece I would say to this is, it strikes me that I can remember as a child, because my parents were involved in the discussion over what we should do to remember the victims of the tornado. And we ended up with the marker that's at Sheer Park and the 8 trees, which represent the 8 victims. But the decision was very similar. The vision was similar in the sense that a passive space where people could go to reflect, whether that was on the sacrifices made, on the difficulties they went through, on the people they lost in their life, but it would not be a place that in any way sort of triggered the difficult memories or tried to tell a story, but rather create a place where people could remember. And that to me makes a lot of sense as an idea. So I'm providing all these comments, I suppose, because I'm hoping that, notwithstanding council's motion last night, that we could refer this presentation to the clerk in line with council's motion. But I would add a little follow-up to that, which is that staff continue to work with, because there's already been work with staff here, staff continue to work to refine the proposal, so that we don't stand still on this. I recognize that runs the risk of somebody else saying, well, you're really sort of approving this one and moving ahead. But there's been a fair amount of work that's already been put into this, and I would like to see this at least not be stopped while we wait to see, sort of what else emerges. So, Mr. Chair, I guess I think by way of feedback, Mr. Malcolm, and please convey, at least on my behalf, I'm sure I probably speak on my colleagues' behalf, a huge thank you to the people who have already put so much thought and effort into this. I actually think it's ideal, and I think the Rotary Club is a perfect partner to deliver this in line with the 4 tests. I mean, it's a project that in many ways meets the 4 tests. So I think, Mr. Chair, subject to other comments from my colleagues, I would move that we refer the presentation to staff in the clerk's department in accordance with the motion last night. But I would add that staff in, I guess it's Parks Planning, be directed to continue to work with the proponents to finalize the concept.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm certainly willing to entertain a motion like that. I'd like to give the other councillors a chance to ask any questions. And one of the things that I might just do is we have at the end of our agenda report from Kevin Bradley, who has looked at this proposal as well. So I'm just wondering if I could have a motion to move that item forward so that we have it in front of us as well, and then we can maybe come to a conclusion on everything that concerns this all at one time. So Councillor Kunkel, you're moving that. Thank you. That's to move the report by Kevin Bradley up so that we can consider it now as well. Any discussion on that? Then I'll take the vote. Anyone in favor? Those in favor? Thank you. That carries. All right. So then we have Kevin Bradley's report as well that is in front of us. So committee members, any further questions of Mr. Malcolm or of the staff report? Councillor Kung.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Malcolm. Some content in that staff report did identify that you have applied for grant funding and that is likely to have an outcome in April. I was wondering if you had heard any update or know of when you might hear back on that grant funding. I think it was due back in April.
End of April was the last I heard.
And I was wondering about in what amount up to is possible in that grant funding. You mentioned the $80,000 in a particular scope around excluding irrigation, that $22,000 in funds were identified around in addition to labor donations and plant material. Is this grant in addition to that $22,000?
Yes, it is. We applied for, if I recall, 79,000.
So I was assuming by that the full cost of this potential garden installation would be covered either through fundraising efforts or that grant. And at this time, there's no additional funding asked to the city of Barrie?
That's our intent. Yes.
Great. Thank you. My only other question was because it is in Sunnydale, and I know that the staff report does talk a bit about the great alignment with the consistency of the 2009 approved Sunnydale Park Master Plan. Has there been any, and I don't want to put, I'm not sure if Deputy Mayor Ward is on the line, but as we're looking at a motion, if there was any comment around location or concern about location.
Deputy Mayor Ward, do you want to answer that question or should we send it off to
Yeah, this has actually been the site that was supposed to be. I'm not sure. Maybe staff knows what happened earlier. The Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority years ago wanted to use this site for a low impact or a zero-scaping garden, something like that. And I guess those plans have disappeared because that was quite a few years ago. So this is quite in keeping with what has always been planned for that area. I mean, the basic thrust of the Sunnydale Master Plan was that it be a passive park, and this is certainly a passive use. In fact, very passive use. So I don't think there's any, I don't have any concerns, and I chaired the master plan committee.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Ward.
So I guess my final comment would be my appreciation for Mayor Lehman starting off that conversation in the context of what we decided last night at council, because I did think about this differently. I was aware, as noted in the staff report, that this had some engagement as early as January 2021 and a lot of momentum and dialogue with the city. I would hate to see this initiative delayed. It'd be nice if we could use our spring and summer gardening time should the grant come forward, that one, it's not jeopardized by being able to action the installation of the garden, and that an opportunity to kind of get that garden established within this this season is a potential that aligns to the planning done to date. So I've got no concerns with supporting a motion, with a nuance that we do support Parks Planning to continue to work with Barrie Rotary.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from committee members? Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Councillor Rietma. Just quickly, I want to say thank you to Mr. Malcolm for bringing this forward. I think it's beautiful, and I agree with the approach suggested by the mayor. And growing up playing in the park in Sunnydale, I think this is a perfect thing to put in that spot. As right now, it's just an empty pit of sand, and it could use some love. So I really appreciate that.
All right. Any other comments from any of the committee members or council members? Councillor or Mr. Mayor, I thought I saw your hand.
You did. I was just going to move the motion, though, if there were no other comments.
All right. Doesn't appear that there are, so I'm happy to take your motion.
And I know that Mr. Bradley provided wording in the memo, but unfortunately, I think that was trumped by council's motion last night. So I'm trying to reach a compromise here in the sense that I want to be true to council's motion last night. I don't think the committee should change council's mind and then send up a recommendation that's contrary to the direction passed last night. So I would say that we refer the presentation and the memo to the clerk, who is consolidating the requests. I know as well there's the Barrie District Association of Realtors that are interested in doing something. But I did want to add a part 2, which is that staff in the Parks Department continue to work with, or Parks Planning, continue to work with the proponents to finalize the proposal. You know, I think that allows it to keep moving, even if there are other complementary groups. And for what it's worth, BDAR is very interested in being part of something. So if those conversations haven't happened yet, it's I think Chantal Hewitt, who's currently the chair, and of course Julia Price-Gregg, who's the executive director, and they have 1,000 members, and they're very interested in helping as well. So I'll let the clerk put the two of you together. That was part of the reason for the motion last night, but that may well be another source of momentum for this, if it aligns with BDAR's vision, and it may be that they want to do something different or additional, but we'll let those conversations occur. In the meantime, thank you so much, and that would be my motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the motion itself? Seeing none, those in favor? Thank you, that carries. And thank you, Mr. Malcolm. Next time, I'm sure I will get your first name correct. And appreciate your involvement here very much. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for couldn't have asked for more. So thank you again. Good evening.
All right. We're now going to move on to advisory committee reports. We have 4 reports to be received. So I'd like a member of the committee to put the following advisory committee reports on the floor just for receiving. So the ones that we're going to receive are report of the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee of March the 2nd, report of the Heritage Barrie Committee of March the 10th, report of the Communities in Bloom Committee dated March the 18th, and the second report of the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee dated April the 6th. So can I have a motion to receive those?
I'll move them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions or comments? All right, those in favor?
Oh, Claire, sorry, Chair, I just had my hand up digitally.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
No, that's okay.
Councilor Morales.
That's okay. I just had my digital hand up. That's okay. So question to you. You're receiving the reports. Yeah. One of the recommendations that the ATS committee has is to write the letter in support of asking the federal government to do the environmental study because it apparently allegedly affects the lake. Is that a recommendation that we're doing momentarily, or are you just accepting the report from the committee?
Yes. At this point, we are receiving the reports, and then we will deal with the individual motions later.
Perfect.
So you'll get the chance to speak to that motion if you want to later on.
Thank you.
Right. Those in favor of receipt? All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. All right. So 2 recommendations from Heritage Barrie from their report. The first one has to do with signage on heritage buildings in downtown Barrie. And their motion to us is that staff in the Development Services Department, in consultation with Enforcement Services, develop guidelines for the installation of signage on heritage buildings in the downtown business improvement area and report back to Heritage Barrie. And once any guidelines are approved, staff review implementing these into the sign bylaw. Can I have somebody move that, put that on the floor for discussion? Thank you, Councillor Elwin. All right, any questions, comments, thoughts on that? No, seeing none, all in favor? Thank you, that's carried. All right, the second recommendation from the Heritage Berry Committee is that the properties known municipally as 90 William Street and 125 Dunlop Street East be added to the Municipal Heritage Register as listed properties. Can I have somebody put that motion on the floor? Thank you, Councillor Kungl. Any discussion, Mayor Lehman?
Thanks. I just thought I'd note for the committee, this one is a couple blocks up on William from me, so I don't have to be concerned about proximity to my property. I did declare a conflict on one that was in the same block. This one's a couple blocks away. It happens to be the Holgate House, and the name is known because of the street, but it should be known because of the member of the Group of Seven, Canada's most famous painters, who was born in the house. Interestingly, the house is named after his dad, who was an engineer on, as in a design engineer on the railway, and actually built the house. But it's his son, I think it's Edwin Holgate, who was the member of the Group of Seven and actually grew up in Allendale. So the name Holgate became famous for that later. Now and again, there are people who come to this neighborhood to see the birthplace of a member of the Group of Seven, believe it or not, even though both the street and the house are named for his dad. And the great news in this is, for anyone who knows the neighborhood, it was for sale about 6 months ago, and the new owners have bought it and wanted to list it, which is really cool. So we have owners of a landmark property now in Barrie who obviously want to preserve its built heritage, which is wonderful. So I just thought I'd let the committee know that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that color. That's it is great. Councillor Kungl.
I also appreciate that, Mayor Lehman, because if I am a big fan of the Group of Seven, had no idea. So if I tend to cycle on my bike, I shouldn't get called as a suspicious resident loitering in the neighborhood. It's listed, but no, that's fantastic news, and my compliments to the new owners and that family for choosing to share that history more publicly with us. That's great.
Yeah, just as a comment, you know, we all, I think, at least I grew up, that history was a dry subject, you know, dates and numbers, and that was it. And you know, history really is the people. It's a story of the people, and there's nothing more fascinating than that. So, any further discussion on that one? All right, then I'll take the vote. Those in favor? Opposed of any? Thank you. That's carried.
Fun fact, he was the 8th member of the Group of Seven. So I don't know if that's a good thing, because, you know, they're called the Group of Seven. They weren't called the Group of Eight. So you got to ask yourself. But not unlike Leonard Skinner and many other great bands, there were a lot of different members over the years, and the membership fluctuated in number and composition. So fun fact. Anyway, I'm full of it tonight.
All right. So then, moving on to the Active Transportation Committee report, we have the first recommendation from the committee is support for the Firebird Communities cycle application to Healthy Communities initiatives. And it is first that staff in the Corporate Facilities and Recreation and Cultural Services Department investigate the feasibility of supporting Firebird Community Cycle, a not-for-profit bicycle repair shop, in their application to the Healthy Communities Initiative grant for bicycle repair stations at city facilities and community centers, and report back to General Committee by the end of May 2021. And secondly, that as part of the investigation, staff engaged with Metrolinx to facilitate the possibility of bicycle repair stations at the Barrie Ghost train station locations. Can I have somebody put that on the floor? So, thank you, Councillor Kungl. Any discussion on that one? No questions? All right, then I'll take the vote. Those in favor? Opposed of any? None. Thank you. That's carried. All right, the second recommendation from the Active Transportation Committee is a request for comprehensive federal environmental impact assessment for the Bradford bypass. That motion reads, 1, that due to the potential negative impacts on Lake Simcoe, the City of Barrie requests that the Government of Canada conduct a comprehensive federal environmental impact assessment of the proposed Bradford bypass and make the results available to the public. And secondly, that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Federal Minister of Environment and Climate Change, Minister of Fisheries and Oceans, Provincial Minister of Transportation, Provincial Minister of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and all local MPPs and MPs. Can I have a member of the committee put that on the floor? Thank you, Councillor Kungl. All right, I have a list already. Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Councillor Rietma. I have an amendment that I will put on the floor. So it is to renumber paragraph 2 as number 3 and to add a paragraph 2 that reads that the City of Barrie also requests that the Government of Ontario conduct the 15 studies outlined as conditions to the class environmental assessment for the Bradford bypass, in addition to studying the potential impacts on Lake Simcoe and the climate.
Okay, thank you. Let's have a discussion about the amendment to start with, and then we'll go to the motion. So, all right, I think I saw Mr. Mayor, you wanted to speak to that?
Yeah, just a quick question of clarification of the mover. So is the amendment replacing anything in the current motion, or are you still want to proceed with the current motion?
It's just adding one more point to the motion as I
adding it. Okay.
Yes.
So I'll just indicate right now, both for that reason and because of the presentation earlier, I will be moving to refer this to staff, and for a couple of reasons. First, the process piece seems quite in flux, and I think the original request, if I understood Ms. Prophet correctly, and if I understand the request from Eco Justice correctly, you know, asking for federal intervention in a provincial EA is a long shot for sure. There's a reason why it almost never, ever happens. But I think I understand their reasons, and some of them are very valid reasons, in my opinion. However, the other piece that I would throw into this is we have a neighbor who we partner with to deliver all kinds of human services in the county, who has a very different view of this. And while we may not agree with their council, they are the council and they are the municipality affected far more substantially by this. Now, the health of Lake Simcoe is a matter of concern for everybody in the City of Barrie. And so, Councillor Aylwin, just by way of feedback on your amendment, I actually am quite supportive of the second half. There's no way this project should go ahead without comprehensive updated assessment of the impact on Lake Simcoe. That should be table stakes. I mean, the Lake Simcoe Protection Act requires that. So I was quite concerned by the government's initial move to try and say, no, the 25-year-old studies mean we don't even have to look at that. I would say that, however, though, I'm not really comfortable with the motion that came out of AT and out of committee, in part because it's so unusual. And to be frank, I'd be concerned about the sector-wide impact of, you know, other municipalities around the lake being able to say that the federal government should overrule the provincial government on matters that are totally provincial and municipal in jurisdiction, because we're going to have 3 or 4 projects coming up that will face exactly the same situation. And so I'm always conscious that we express our legitimate concerns on behalf of our residents without doing so in a way that, to me, compromises the process. And it ultimately is troubling in terms of our relationship with our neighbors around the lake and in the county. So, you know, like, my take on this is I'm very concerned about the impact on the marsh and the knock-on impact on the lake. I am less willing to intervene in the way that we've been asked to, because I'm concerned about both the precedent that sets, and to be frank, it's kind of a strange long shot. And I think that's why, even Margaret here tonight rightly said, no, we're going to pursue the province doing the right thing, not sort of try and get the federal government to intervene. So I would just like to get our staff's take on this. I would like us to be aware of the context of our neighbors' concerns, who are, of course, more directly impacted. But I also want us to be able to express those concerns about the lake, because I think that's quite real. I don't think that's something that we should take lightly, at least until we understand it. So I guess I'm speaking in favor of the second half of the amendment. I'm not in favor of the overall motion without sending it to staff, though. So I think I'll support the amendment, Mr. Chair, and then I'm going to move a referral to staff.
All right. Well, I think that may be a very good process anyway, because it'll give us the chance to have a discussion about the content of the motion. And as you know, that your referral motion is not debatable. So
yeah, I didn't want to. Yeah.
We can proceed to have a discussion about it, and then we'll see where we go from there. All right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Kung. You're on mute.
I was going to ask Councillor Elman if he could reread the new paragraph 2. I did want to pick up, if possible, the language Mayor Lehman referred to. And if helpful, I can send along the content so it doesn't belabor the process to staff, but was hoping somehow in that paragraph, when we're talking a bit about a request to the Ontario government, it could read as follows. That as required by the Lake Simcoe Protection Act, the Ontario government conduct a comprehensive impact assessment on Lake Simcoe and those vulnerable watersheds and inflows into Lake Simcoe, and attach that commentary in some way into your ask. So I can move, if that's in alignment, I can move that to staff if it's being referred to staff to kind of look at, I'm assuming, consideration on the framing of the motion before it comes. Would this come back to general committee then? Or would it just move to staff to look at the framing of a letter?
Okay, well, a couple of things. First of all, your suggestion, we could make that as item number 4 in the motion, which would just add more meat to the bones if the referral to staff is successful. So I'm quite prepared to accept an amendment to the amendment on that basis. Yeah, I think I will leave it at that. Councillor Elwin, I think I saw you next.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. So to be clear, Councillor Kungl, are you moving that as a separate amendment? I would welcome that if you are, just for clarity of debate and direction.
Yes, thank you. If because I know you referenced Lake Simcoe, so I'm not sure if what I tabled was repetitive in part. So I'll actually table it as an amendment.
All right. So Councillor Kungl's amendment has to do with the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan specifically, and an evaluation of the impact of the proposal on Lake Simcoe specifically. All right. Any discussion on that amendment? Councillor Elwin.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. Yes, I'm absolutely supportive of this. I think it strengthens what we have going on here. And just because a referral motion is non-debatable, I did kind of want to address that piece. So I'm hearing from Mayor Lehman, and I think other members of the committee, that we're generally supportive of asking the province to take into consideration the impacts on Lake Simcoe, the watershed. So I would suggest considering the potentially time-sensitive nature of this, since the province is currently, we're waiting for the province to make a decision on the exemption of those studies, that we separate out that piece that we have agreement on and refer the request for the federal environmental impact assessment to staff to have more information in line with what Mayor Lehman suggested, including wanting to be good partners with our municipal neighbors.
All right. So now we have I'm sure I'm confused. We have, I think, 3 amendments or 2 amendments, and now we have an idea that we should split this motion in some fashion or other. So, Madam Clerk, I see your hand up, and I appreciate that.
Councillor Riepma, if we could take one amendment at a time and vote on that, and then we'll get around to that. I think there were 3 different amendments I heard. So if we can start with Councillor Elwin's, then Councillor Kungals, and then back to Councillor Elwin's, that would be appreciated.
I think that makes very good sense.
Thank you.
All right. So let's deal with Councillor Elwin's amendment. Do you want to read that just so that we're 100% clear, Keenan?
For sure, absolutely. So it's to renumber paragraph 2 as number 3, and to add a paragraph 2 that reads that the City of Barrie also requests that the Government of Ontario conduct the 15 studies outlined as conditions to the class environmental assessment for the Bradford bypass, in addition to studying the potential impacts on Lake Simcoe and the climate.
All right, are we clear on that amendment? Any discussion? All right, then I'll take the vote on that amendment. Those in favor? 1, 2, 3, that's carried. Thank you. So now on Councillor Kungal's amendment. Now, Councillor Kungal, just to be clear, can we have you read yours?
Sure. And I'll look for corrections about if it's the Protection Act or Protection Plan, but my language as written was that as required by the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan, I believe the Ontario government conduct a comprehensive impact assessment on Lake Simcoe and those vulnerable watersheds and inflows into Lake Simcoe. So it captures a bit of what Ms. Prophet was talking about, but I wasn't sure, Councillor Aylwin, if your motion, because it also said the Ontario is looking at Lake Simcoe, if it's a duplication. That was trying to get to my previous. I'm okay either way, but.
Councillor Aylwin?
I think your amendment, Councillor Kungal, is a bit more specific, and so I would support it as is, in addition to the piece that's in the amendment that just passed.
Okay.
Okay. Any discussion on Councillor Kungal's? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Chair Riepma. Just want to make sure any other member of the committee didn't want to say a point. Councillor Kungal. So what you're asking for, are those studies that you're asking for in addition to the 15 studies that were ordered to be updated by Minister Mulroney as part of the 2002 EA? So in addition to that?
Yes, in response, Councillor Morales, they are not inclusive of the 15. So the 15 carries back, I believe, as Ms. Prophet referred to the 2002 assessment. Those were areas that were still outstanding that needed some work to be compliant. That could be covered under the exception because of how far back that was dated. There is no consideration on Lake Simcoe or the impact on Lake Simcoe. So I'm hoping at minimum, if the Ontario government says we're not looking to do the 15 assessments, we will at least have some pressure because of the Lake Simcoe Protection Act to get something specifically done around those vulnerable watersheds that we know. I think there's 11 hectares that are potentially impacted by the bypass route.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the feedback. So I'm having a live discussion with a councillor from Bradford right now. As we know, this bypass is a lifeline for this community. It has been desired for decades. It finally has a bit of momentum going forward. So I guess to on your amendment, I'm just getting information here that obviously the bypass approved in 2017, part of the growth plan as vital for growth that already occurred in South Simcoe and Northern New York region by then Premier Wynne and Del Luca at the time. And then the councillors also telling me that Minister Mulroney did order the 15 studies to update the approved EA. While it was from 2002, those 15 studies are to kind of bring it up to standard. Now, will they bring it up to the Lake Simcoe, the act that you're talking about? That's a question. But I'm being told by this councillor that some of those studies are in the process of being done. Some of those 15, and some of them are already finished. And then the other feedback that the councillor's telling me is that to the best of York Region's legal counsel's knowledge, there's never been a federal impact assessment ordered of a provincial highway. That's asking essentially, not on your amendment, but on the overall motion. I'm going to discuss it now before it gets referred. That's something that, according, again, as far back as they can look at, has never happened. So a lot of the comments Mayor Lehman said earlier, I completely concur with. So I'm not going to repeat those, but I'm just wondering if even your amendment essentially is already achieving what will be achieved by the 15 studies that Minister Mulroney has already essentially commissioned or are in the process of completing. And if that's not the case, I would be a little, again, like Simcoe, obviously we have stake in it as well. But I'm a little bit hesitant. Obviously it's the committee's wish, but I'm a little bit hesitant on adding unnecessary delays. Important questions and studies, absolutely, but unnecessary delays to a vital project, a lifeline project for neighboring community that they've been dealing with this. So if other members of the committee, I guess, share similar thoughts, I would personally, as a non-member, be supportive of even Mayor Lehman's approach of even your amendment of basically talking with staff, getting our staff to pick up the phone, just triple check with the staff members and the politicians in Bradford and surrounding area, just to make sure that we're finding that balance between asking for what is necessary for this project without accidentally adding more delays or unnecessary inconveniences. I obviously want everybody to understand that we like the lake, respect the lake. We have an ownership in the lake, but I wouldn't want our neighboring municipalities to think that that we're just maybe missing the mark. And sometimes that's as simple as picking up the phone or the email.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment on the floor? Okay, Keenan, or Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Councillor Rietma. And thank you, Councillor Morales, for bringing that information forward. I would appreciate if the councillor from Bradford would reach out to the committee members with that information. That would be helpful. And I'm guessing it's Councillor Scott, so say hi if it is.
It is Councillor Scott, so I will say hi.
All right, thank you. All right, any further discussion? All right, then the amendment that's on the floor from Councillor Kunkel. Those in favor? 1, 2, any opposed? Nobody's opposed. Thank you, that's carried. All right, so then we, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, the referral motion. So, and recognizing the Councillor Aylwin's desire to potentially vote in favor of not referring or referring one paragraph, I'd be fine with doing this paragraph by paragraph. I think we now have 4. But I am going to urge the committee to refer all 4 paragraphs, and I think the discussion we just had is exactly why. There is still, I think, a lot of information more needed before the city of Barrie takes its position on this. I'm quite comfortable with the position that says we need to be expressing our concern about the impact of the project on the health of the lake. However, I think which studies are agreed to and which aren't, which have the government tried to exempt themselves from, what is still on the table there and what isn't, seems to be in confusion. It certainly is for me, and I thought I came into this meeting with an understanding of where it was, and some of the information from both Ms. Prophet and evidently from a Bradford councillor is conflictual. So I think the appropriate thing to do is refer the whole thing to staff, but recognizing the desire of members maybe not to support that, I'm fine to move referral paragraph by paragraph.
All right,
I'm sorry, to be clear, it would be to refer the matter to Staff and Development Services and for memo to report back to City Building Committee. And I would move that for all 4 paragraphs.
All right, so we have a motion to refer all 4 parts of the motion. Councillor Kunkel.
Thank you, Chair Rietma. Just in advance of starting that process, I'm cognizant of other sensitivities as of yesterday. I think, yeah, when we're looking at recent media about Bill 527 with Schedule 3 having passed the province, this heightened sensitivity to how quickly things could move. And so I wasn't sure when we talk about deferring for staff, if we could set a timeline there or something that would be reasonable, if there's an indication of how quickly the government may or may not move. Maybe I'm just through Mr. Councillor Morales's commentary in time with the councillor in Bradford that seemed to be focused on not delaying anything or impeding anything. I guess my concern is, not knowing that there's blanket legislation right now that will allow this current provincial government to move quickly. If there's anything that we care about, does it behoove us to put a timeline on this coming back to at least the next city building committee and not further out?
Sure. I would make my referral motion to the next city building committee.
All right. And I see Ms. Miller has come on the line. So, Ms. Miller?
Chair Rietma, we can get that information back for the next meeting, no problem.
Okay, I thought that would be the case. All right, so we're looking at basically a month to come back to this committee. All right, I have a referral motion on the floor. It's not debatable. However, it's entirely up to you if you want to split that motion, Councillor Aylwin.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. But that's what I was going to ask, if whether this was a referral motion just for paragraph 1 at this time.
No.
Okay.
Oh, just a second.
Yeah, I'm sorry. To be clear, what I meant by doing the 4 of them separately was that I would give the committee members the chance to vote on each paragraph separately.
Okay.
And if the referral motion fails, of course, then it remains on the floor here at City Building. But I would like to independently move referral motions on each of the 4 paragraphs.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
All right. So then the referral motion on the first part of the motion, item 1 of the motion. Any discussion? No discussion. Those in favor of referral? Yes, thank you. That is passed unanimously. And item number 2, the motion to be referred to staff. Those in favor? 1, 2, and 1 opposed. Thank you. All right, so that carries. That'll be referred to staff as well. Item number 3 of the motion. Those in favor of referring it? 1, 2. Thank you. And any opposed? 1 opposed, so that carries. That will be referred to staff. And then finally, item 4 for referral to staff. Those in favor? 2 and 1 opposed, so that also is referred to staff. So we have in effect referred the whole motion to staff, and we'll hear from staff in a memo or a report next building committee. All right, thank you for your hard work on that one. Appreciate that. The last item on our agenda is another recommendation from the Active Transportation Sustainability Committee. And that has to do with developing a Vision Zero policy and traffic calming policy update. And the motion reads as follows: that staff in the Development Services Department submit an intake form as part of the 2022 business plan and budget process for the development of a Vision Zero policy and a traffic calming policy update. Can I have a member of the committee put that on the floor? Thank you, Councillor Kungl. All right, any discussion on that? Councillor Aylwin. Yeah, okay.
Just very quickly, I wanted to thank city staff, in particular Brett Greatrix, for championing this type of work within the corporation. And I know he's been working with other municipalities across Ontario to leverage the knowledge around our province to make this a reality, to make our streets safer. And one important thing to note that surprised me was when the city last applied to become a bicycle-friendly community, which we weren't successful in, unfortunately. One of the main reasons that was given during the application process was that we had the highest number of cyclist deaths on a road of all the cities that applied for the bicycle-friendly designation. So that's an issue we have to address, and I'm hoping that a Vision Zero policy can do that.
All right, Councillor Congo.
Thank you. And I echo Councillor Elman's comments about staff and the work that's been progressing to date. My understanding, as well as in reference to the motion, just for those that might not appreciate it, is I believe our traffic calming policy might be 10 years old. So while we talk about an intake form, which means a request for money in the next budget in consideration, do you want to identify that? I think it's a really appropriate ask, and it's one that I think would be important to make sure is captured in our next budget cycle consideration.
All right. Any further comments on this? All right. Well, then the motion is on the floor, and we'll take the vote. Those in favor? Thank you. That carries. Well, thank you very much for being part of this committee this evening. That concludes our agenda, and we'll see you in a month, or we'll probably see you before. Frankly, I think sometimes I see more of you than I do of my family.
I was saying, where are you going, Claire? Where are you going?
All right. Good night.